talking about making that jump, going from a technician to a shop owner. As I mentioned, a lot of people at this event, you're either going through this right now, you've done it before, or in the future you're looking to do that. And so, I'm personally really looking forward to hearing Peter's thoughts on this. As always, the plug, don't forget to use the app. If we got some time here, and I'm hoping that we do, there's going to be options for Q&A. As he's going through his session here, by all means, pop your questions in there, and that way when we get to the end, we can ideally try and cover some of them. But with that, without further ado, please, warm welcome for Peter Cooper.
So again, I'm Peter Cooper with Ascend Consulting. What I'm going to talk about today is that transition from being a technician to an owner of a shop. And there's a lot of shop owners out there that have already made that transition, but they may not necessarily have changed their mindset. And one of the things that I tell a lot of my clients and people I work with is you have to understand that the day that you opened your doors, you're not a mechanic anymore. You're a business owner. And you have to think like a business owner. You have to have strategies like a business owner. And so that's what I'm going to talk about and give some helpful tips to make that transition mentally. So as entrepreneurs, if you own a shop, entrepreneurs only make up 3% of the population, but you generate 75% of all the new jobs in America. So you're a pretty special group of people. And I'm not here to talk about fixing engines. I'm here to talk about fixing your business. How many of you in here think it's important to teach your staff how to do things? Is education an important part of what you do as business owners? My question is who is teaching you? What are you doing as business owners and leaders to continue to improve yourself? And it's something to really think about, that for you to help them, you need to focus on helping you. Because as a business owner, you're what's standing in the way of achieving the next level that you're looking for in your business. And I want to read a piece of scripture that a friend of mine sent me. It's fitting, it's Peter 4:10. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God, grace it in his various forms. So, that's really one of the things you have to do is you have to grow yourself to help you grow your people. So again, my name is Peter Cooper. I'm a 26-year veteran of heavy duty. I'm a farm kid from a very small town in central Iowa. I grew up as a farmer. I never liked that aspect of farming. I was always drawn towards fixing the tractors or fixing the equipment. And that led to me becoming an ASE Master Tech. I later on became an instructor for diesel laptops and a shop owner. I was able to grow a very successful shop in a very small town to a multi-million-dollar operation. I sold that to a larger organization. I merged with them and became the director of operations, ultimately over 6 locations and over 100 technicians. So I've done a lot of the transitions in different stages. And so what I've done is I've turned decades of experience of really hands-on technical knowledge into helping other business owners become themselves better. So a little history, because I like history. In 1540, which was 485 years ago, Coronado came to Arizona in search of gold. And like a lot of you, when you started your business, you were probably looking for a better life. Whether it be financial freedom or freedom of time, you were looking for something. And I think a lot of business owners lose sight of that, of why they started their business. And they get so stuck in the day-to-day that they think they're trapped. They don't see a way out of this repetitive cycle, what's referred to as the hedonic treadmill of being stuck doing this. And like a lot of shop owners, what Coronado did was he completely missed the mark on where the money really was. He was standing on the money the whole time. He was in search all over the Southwest of gold, and he came through Arizona. But he was standing on it. Arizona's produced $53 billion of gold. And he never saw it. He discovered the Grand Canyon and ignored it, thought it was nothing important. So that's a really important thing is finding that gold, that value within your own business, and it's there. Most of you have a very busy shop. You have more than enough customers. The issue really comes down to profitability a lot of times. And a lot of owners are chasing the wrong thing. They continue to try to do more and more and more, and that's where the revenue profits will come from. And really, truly, the key to business is learning how to do more, learning how to do less more profitably. So let's talk about what a technician mindset is. What I used to tell my managers and different people that I coach is, you don't fix trucks. As managers, you fix people. And I know that's a hard concept. A lot of people will say, look, I didn't get in this to be a psychologist. Well, you're in it now. If you manage people, that is what you were here to do. And hopefully your people fix the trucks. When I first started my shop, I thought that the only way to success was just do more work more hours. There were days that I would look at the checkbook on Friday and say, we're broke. I would jump in a service truck. I'd work all weekend. Sometimes I would sleep in the truck just to be able to make payroll the next week because it was that tight. And I'm sure some of you have all have stories of going through those tough times where you would look at the checkbook and didn't know how you'd make it through the next week. And I always would go in my private time or executive time, I call it, I would do it at like 5 o'clock in the morning. And I was sitting there one day writing out checks, and I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way to run a shop than me stuck in this endless cycle of being broke all the time. I mean, I knew I was good at what I did. I knew I had a quality service, and I knew the community liked what I did, and I just could not figure out why I wasn't making any money. Well, what it comes down to is numbers. You have to absolutely lead by numbers. So a technician, when they look at a problem, they look at it and say, I've got to fix it. I'm that guy. I'm the only guy. I'm the best mechanic, whatever it might be. That's a technician mindset. The other thing they do a lot, and this is a trap shop owners fall into, is it will take me longer to teach someone how to do it than if I just do it myself, right? How many people are guilty of that? I was horrible at that. Let me just jump in there and show you how to do it, right? It'll only take 5 minutes. Well, one thing you really need to be careful of is you have to not do that because you're stealing their glory. You're stealing that win from them. And you may not see it. You may not understand that that's what you're doing, but you have to think of it that way. And what I call that sometimes is the daddy fix-it syndrome. If anybody of you are parents, when your kid brings you a toy that's broken and says, Daddy, fix it, and you fix it, and you feel really good about that. You feel you get a lot of joy and personal fulfillment out of being the person that fixes it. The problem with that is that cycle will never get you out of where you're at currently. If you're trying to break into the next level of business, you have to change your mindset. So what's an owner identity or a manager's identity? For many of you, your identity is deeply entwined into what you do. If I was to introduce myself to any of you out here and ask you, what do I do? Shake your hand, you'd say, well, I own a shop. Well, do you own a shop or do you run a business? When I meet people, I tell people, what do they ask me, what do I do? I said, I solve problems. That's what I do. It's that simple. And if you're stuck and don't have a traction to move forward, if you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always got. You have to really, at some point, shops have to learn sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. You may have to step back a little bit and say, let's build a plan. Let's architect a plan. I think a lot of shop owners, they started a shop because they had this vision that they wanted to run a business and they liked that idea. But it's kind of like trying to build a house by just showing up and nailing some boards together and hope that you build something great. It's really hard to do. So one of the most important things that I teach managers is what I call SHED. So it's an acronym. It's shared tasks with your team, hand over responsibilities, empower your employees, and delegate effectively. And if you're able to do this, what it will do is it will free you from those chains of the day-to-day operation. It'll allow you to move on to that next stage, that next level in your business. So really what you need to focus on is the overall health of your business. You need to manage my numbers. You have to absolutely have a set of KPIs. And I think that the last presentation really addressed that well. What are some of the numbers you need to look at? You need to manage with facts and not feelings. I'm going to tell you right now, you cannot teach your staff how to manage with feelings, because your feelings are yours and they're not theirs. And if you think that they're going to do it just like you, they're not, because that's not them. And another thing you have to learn as a shop owner is that what you do is not special. Everybody in this room fixes trucks or equipment. That's what they do. It's how you do it that makes you special. And that's the thing that makes your shop and your store unique, is it's how you do it. Another big problem that a lot of people will run into is they get to a stage and they have what's called the I succeeded stage. I got to where I'm at by grit, determination, and that's why I'm successful. And you're absolutely right. That is why you're successful. That's also why you're not successful. That's why you will not move on to the next level in business, more than likely. And it comes down to that you're thinking that doing it the same way is going to work moving forward. Another thing you have to realize, when you hit different stages in business, it's a totally different game. When you go from a $2 million store to a $10 million store, it is a completely different situation as you scale. So one of the things I always had every single one of my managers read was this book. It's from Doing to Leading. It's an amazing book. It's a short read. It's written from the perspective of a gentleman that ran body shops. It gets into the psychology of managing humans or people. And it really explains things like why people do what they do, what motivates people psychologically and chemically in their brain. It's not too deep of a dive, but it gets into some really interesting things about dopamine and about how people react to wins, which is very important as owners. You really have to be careful with that. You cannot steal the wins from your employees. You got to let them win that battle. Another thing I tell people is you cannot manage people. You can manage systems. You can lead people. And if you've ever tried to manage people the way a lot of people talk about it, you'll realize that it isn't very successful. And you'll start asking yourself, well, why is it they just can't do what I tell them to do? Like, I wrote it all down. I wrote all these procedures in depth, and I said, you just got to do this. You got to look at that system. Sometimes you have to actually be a therapist. I know this is crazy to say, but I can tell you in my experience as a business owner that some of the best employees I ever had became my worst employee almost overnight. And if anybody doesn't know what I'm talking about, think about the last coworker you had that went through a divorce. How good of an employee was he that day, right? So sometimes you really do. And I tell shop owners too, I said, you got to be careful about their mindset and who they are. A perfect recipe for a bad employee is a 60-hour week and 6 days a week. You want to see a guy get divorced really fast? Let him work 60 hours a week nonstop. And sometimes you have to be their friend and be like, dude, you need to slow down. And I know in the short term, you may think that that's horrible because he just needs to put in more hours so we can meet that goal. But you really have to have a long-term look on what it does to them mentally. So another step in all this is really starting to think about your business. How are you going to structure your business? And I'm not going to go into this too much because tomorrow we're going to have a speaker that talks about EOS. But I really truly believe in EOS. A lot of my customers know this. I push it hard. It's an amazing way to run a business. And it really starts teaching you that you really are the limiting factor in your business. The business can only get as big as you are. And you're only one person. You can only do so much. So shop owners need to understand that the absolute secret to running their shop is having a shop that can run without you. I know that I've talked to a lot of people this week that talk about, I would like to have a second shop. My number one rule for that is, if you think you're ready to have a second shop, go on vacation for a month. If your phone rings more than once a week, you're not ready for a second shop, because that business cannot run without you. And if it cannot run without you, the business isn't running, you're running it. So you have to be really careful with that. Another way to think of this is shop owners have a very distinct mindset. And one of the things they like to do is they like to meddle. They like to go out on the shop floor and help. Are you really helping? When you come out of your office and you go down there and be like, oh, I'm just going to help so-and-so, and you start meddling with things, and you start saying, oh, pull that truck in and work on that first, and you start messing with the system. And the way I tell managers is, if you were running a race team, would you strap yourself under the hood and keep tuning the car if it's running down the racetrack? Or would you let it go and see what happens? And then bring it back and make an adjustment, right? But that's what you're doing in business. One deep, deep lesson you have to learn as an owner, when you walk, if you're a shop that's big enough to have a store manager or a shift lead, if you have a hierarchy, if you're not a one-man show, you have to learn that when you step out of your office, you're not the owner of that shop. You're an employee. And if you want to go down on the shop floor and change a wheel seal, you're an employee. You're not the owner anymore. And you have to honor that. And you have to let your people have that win. Now, if you see something, a guy's going to cut his finger off, yes, intervene. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you see somebody doing something that's not the way you think it should be done, do not intervene. Go to that person's. Follow your own chain of command that you've set up. And that's what EOS is about. It's about accountability, and it's about having a way of doing it. One of the other things you need to think about is your mindset. Not everybody in here may be what's referred to as the visionary. You may really start, if you do believe in EOS and you embrace that system, you realize, look, I may not be a visionary. I did that in one of my businesses. I owned a limo company. And I realized really quick, I couldn't answer the phone, do all the bookings, be the mechanic. I just couldn't do it all. And I realized, look, I'm a lot better mechanic than I was a business owner at that time. So I hired a business person to come in and run my business for me. It's the greatest decision I ever made. I went back out in the shop and I was happy because that was my happy place at the time. I wasn't ready to move on to that stage yet. And I still had a lot to give. I was young enough. My back didn't hurt too bad yet. I'm sure all of you know what I'm talking about there. So there's another really good book, if you've never been introduced to EOS, I recommend this. It's called Rocket Fuel. It really explains the process of EOS, and it gets into the psychology of business owners, and it gets you to understand where your place may be in that organization as it grows. Because like I said, just because you're the owner doesn't mean that you may be the visionary, the CEO, the COO, all these other terms that get thrown around. That may not be your place. You may be better suited to be what's referred to as an integrator. You may be a doer and a numbers person. So if you're the type of person who loves to sit in your office and run policies and procedures and who loves to deal with HR problems, you're probably not what's referred to as a visionary. You're probably an integrator. Me, I was the opposite. I couldn't stand all those details. I just would rather let someone else deal with it. But I do believe in order to fix your business, you have to diagnose it. Just like if you were fixing a truck, you got to diagnose it first. And I think a lot of business owners have to take a deep look at their business and what you want from it. It's what I ask business owners, the very first thing I ask them when I coach. What do you want to be when you grow up? And if you truly can't answer that question, you need to ask it to yourself. Because what does it look like 20 years from now? If you're still going out there and turning wrenches and doing all that, how is that going to work when you're 50 or 60 years old and your back hurts? I haven't met too many old tire guys in my life. It doesn't last long. So how's the answer to fixing a business? It's systems. I know this is kind of the dry part of it, systems, but systems really work. I mean, if you talk, I have a couple clients here and a couple of people I've managed over the years that are at this convention. That's the thing that changed the shop, was a system. A documented, systematic way of doing it. It's more important that everybody on the boat is rowing in the right direction or the same direction than it is the right direction, because you can fix that. And consistency is the key. So I actually teach or I coach a shooting team with my sons. And I tell kids all the time, look, I don't care if you can hit a target or not, because there's a difference between accuracy and consistency, right? Precision and accuracy. I'd much rather have you be precise than be accurate. And that's what you have to start when you start building systems in your shop. You also have to think about this, and this is the single biggest thing that gets overlooked in big business, and this is what will make you far surpass the big shops, and that is this. You still have the mindset that you know who makes the money. There's only one position in a shop that makes money, unless you sell parts retail, and that's the technician. And so many big businesses lose sight of that fact, and they do all these things. They build these complex systems because it makes their life easier. And that was one thing I never cared about when I ran businesses. I don't care how bad my job is. I'm not here for me. I'm here for them. And that's the true measurement of leadership. It's not your ability or mastery of a skill. True leadership is how good you are at making your people better. That is should be your objective in your business. Do you have a documented way of doing things? If you don't, think about it. Perfect example of that. You have a truck goes out, gets worked on, comes back, gets towed in, the wheel fell off. Do you have a documented procedure that says every lug nut has to be torqued to 450 to 500 foot-pounds? Because if you don't, was that really the technician's fault that wheel fell off? Or did you fail as a leader to establish a set way of doing things, a set standard? Another way I tell people to look at this is, most of you probably flew here on a plane, right? Are you all happy that the pilot used a checklist? I bet you are. And if checklists can work for pilots, it can work for a technician putting a tire on. It can work for a technician who is doing an oil change. And one of the ways you can beat with that, right, is have canned jobs. I know a lot of people underutilize canned jobs in their shop, and it really makes, you can put a little bit, that's an example of something, you can put a little bit of an investment in, maybe an hour or two, and build a couple canned jobs, and over a week you're going to save more than an hour. And not just your time, but your employees' time. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. One of the things I really encourage owners and business owners to do is reach out to your peers. And I know this has been said a couple times in this already, but these people in this room are not your competition. I've run a couple different businesses in my life, and I was most successful at a lot of them because I was able to take my competition and turn them into a resource. There are times that maybe you need someone. You know, maybe you don't want to say no to your good customer because you've got a guy out on work comp or he's sick and you got to get a job done. Is it really that bad to refer it to another shop or have them come in and do it? I mean, I used to do that all the time. I would have a mobile company. The guy, that's all he did was mobile. He 100% was mobile. If I was too busy, I'd say, hey, call this guy. And he's like, I don't do shop work. If they need a clutch, take it to you, right? So that's another way of doing it. So another thing to think about is, what's your vision for your shop? Where is it that you want to go? Where do you want to be? And so many shop owners have this vision in their head, but they struggle to get it out. They struggle to teach their people what it is they're there to do and why they're there to do it. And one thing I always say is if I walk into a shop and I ask the guy sweeping the floor, what do you do here? Meaning, what does the shop do? And he doesn't give me the same answer the owner does. We have a vision problem. They are not in line with why you were there and how it is that you do it. So one idea is the idea of 10X. I know this is kind of a newer concept, but it really works in this environment because if you have a shop that's doing $1 million a year and you say, look, I want to do $10 million a year. The path to get to 10 million is easier than it is to get to 2, and here's why. It's just like this picture illustrates. When the path to the top of the mountain is clear, it's easy to get to see where the top of the mountain is. But imagine if you were stuck in that forest and you couldn't see where the mountain was, how would you be able to reach it? And that's exactly what clarifying vision does, and that's what the concept of 10X is, without going into a 200 or 300 page book, is exactly that, it's clarity. Another thing that a lot of store owners and a lot of managers do is they try to overestimate what they can accomplish in a week. They try to get everything crammed into this tight little thing and say, we're going to get all this done this week or this year. I guarantee you that everyone in this room will overestimate what you can accomplish in a week, and you will underestimate what you can accomplish in a year. And when you have a clear path, it is so much easier to do it. And it's about organizational clarity. If your staff understands why they're there, their job has purpose. I know that's a crazy concept to think the guy sweeping the floor's got purpose. But when he understands that he's an integral part of that he supports the tech, and the tech is what pays all the bills, that he's there to make that tech more efficient. It's the same way when you look at a job. If you've got a shop that's running 50, 60% efficient, which a lot of shops are, the data shows that. And you've never actually looked at things like how many steps your technician takes in a day, try that sometime. I think every single cell phone out there tracks your steps, whether you're realizing it or not. Do that as an experiment. Go in on Monday morning and ask your best billing tech, your medium tech, and your worst tech. Just see if they'll track their steps. It's an interesting metric to see how much time they're spending walking to the parts room. How much time are they spending walking around? I mean, I've seen technicians get underneath the truck, and I'm like, what are you doing? They're like, well, I'm going to change the oil. I'm like, with no tools? Like, no rag? No, I mean, you didn't think you needed a rag when you were going to change the oil? Like, you know this. Like, come on. And that's a system, right? You can do that. I know when I was a young tech that I started training others. Later, when I became a journeyman and I was teaching apprentices, I could tell an apprentice to go to my toolbox and get me the 2 sockets that are painted white. I didn't have to say it's in the left drawer, it's in the top, it's in the corner. I literally took the sockets for changing the oil into Detroit and I painted it white, 27 millimeter. Why did I do that? It was easy. I only had to do it once and it was very quick. It was very easy to look at that rail and pull that off. So that's an example of some things you can do systemizing your program. Another big thing is culture. What kind of culture have you built in your shop? And I used to ask managers this. I'm going to pick on Philip because he was one of my managers at the store. Hey, Philip, do you still have your bus? So I would ask managers sometimes when things were tough, when they'd miss a goal, when they'd have a bad day. And I would ask them, are you still on the bus? And they literally had a little toy bus on their desk. Because what a bus is, a bus represents a business. So there's a gentleman named Jim Collins. He said, the first is the right people on the bus. The second is the wrong people off the bus. And the third is the right people in the right seat. And you have to build a business in that order. And what does that mean? So I come from a bus background, so this is why I use this analogy. Your business is like a fixed route bus on a city bus route. We know where the bus is going, we know when the bus is going there, and we know where the destination is. We know where it started and we know where it ended. And just like your business cycle in life, you're going to have people get on the bus and you're going to have people get off the bus, and that's okay. You're going to see this as you scale your business. You're going to have times that you as a business will outgrow people. They are just not a good fit anymore. And you know what? That's okay. They're not a bad person. They just don't fit it anymore. You know, they were happy with when it was just you and him, right? When it was 2 guys fixing trucks, you know, everybody did everything. And then, you know, as you dial down, it doesn't always work. The other thing is sometimes you can hire somebody and they're the right person for you, meaning they're the right person to work in your business, but they may not be doing the right thing. It may not be what they're naturally gifted at doing. And that's okay too. Sometimes you need to shuffle things around. Sometimes as you grow in an organization, you realize that we need someone that's more hyper-focused or specialized in a very specific area, and that person no longer fits. And then of course you have get the wrong people out of the bus. I think we all have had stories of coworkers that were toxic. We all may have stories of when, you know, you finally let a guy go that was a good mechanic, but he was not good for you. He was not good for the business. He didn't believe in what you did. He didn't believe in how you did it. And you'll be amazed. It's like everybody sighs this big sigh of relief the next day, and they're like, man, we were wondering when you were going to do that. Like, why is he still here? Another way of looking at that is, do you have very defined metrics of what good is? Have you clearly defined what good is, and have you clearly defined what bad is? I tell people it's like building an engine. If you were going to rebuild an engine, would you rebuild the engine and never measure anything and never look up a spec in the book? You wouldn't, because you're going to take a piston out, right? You're going to measure the liner, you're going to look at all these things and say, is it good, is it bad, is it reusable? And it's that way with people. So if you haven't established with your people what good is, and you haven't established what bad is, how do they know how they're doing? Can you go up to any one of your technicians at any moment in time and ask them, are you doing good this week? And do they know what that means? Not are they doing good meaning are they producing good? So it's something to really think about if you haven't clearly defined those roles. One way you might think about doing this when you're hiring and building your business is doing personality tests. I know it seems like crazy that I'm going to personality test a mechanic. I can tell you that there's some tests out there, and I'll never forget this. we would always pull these tests back out at a year, and we would read them. And all the good things were there, and all the bad things were there. We just didn't always believe them. I even had a guy one time that scored all zeros. And I called the company up and said, hey, what's wrong with your test? It's broke. They said, it's not broke. I said, well, something's wrong. They said, take it again. Takes it again, gets zeros again. I called him up and said, what's this mean? This dude's an emotional wreck. I didn't believe him, so I interviewed the guy. They were right. That dude was an emotional wreck. He was never going to be a good store manager. So it's just another tool in the toolbox. I tell people, look, do a personality test, do a phone interview, do the personality test, and then that way when you have an interview, you have something to talk about. And you need to document too, what is a good tech? So what I always did is I took my best tech and I had him take the test. And I literally gave it to the manager and said, this is a good mechanic. This is our mechanic. This is what we want. Because you got to think about too, if you haven't established what good is and you haven't established exactly what you want, how do you know you have it when that guy's sitting in front of you in an interview? And how do your people know that? How do your store managers and your shift leads, how do they know what good is if we haven't established it? So it's really something to think about when you're building your business, is really establishing those standards. And yeah, sometimes you can just ask your people, are you on the bus? Because I've had people blatantly say, I'm not on the bus today. I said, good, go home. Come back tomorrow, let's talk about that. So another thing is KPIs. You have to have set standards of what you expect from your people and what you expect from the performance of the building. Now I know that if you were in here, you guys just did an hour of this. I'm a real keep it super simple person, so I took a lot of those concepts a long time ago and put it into 5 numbers. Last year I did a whole presentation on this. But you can literally take these 5 numbers and this will tell you your budget of your shop. So one of the things people ask me, when you get into hiring people, is how much can I afford to pay a tech? I don't know. I'm actually going to do a whole presentation on this on Thursday. But I can't tell you because I don't know your budget. I don't know how much money you can afford. I can tell you that when you give me a number. So we'll use a round number. Say you're charging $135 an hour for labor rate, which by the way is the average shop labor in the United States. So says Full Bay. And they have a lot of data to back that up. How much can you afford to pay a tech? You can afford to pay him $27 an hour. That's it. So if you're paying a guy $50 an hour, you can't afford that. And a lot of shop owners are going to say, but I have to. That's what it takes to get it. I said, I agree. But you can't afford it. That's like saying, I got to go buy a new car, but you can't afford it. Unless you want to be one of the 30% of shop owners in America that aren't taking a paycheck. And I'll be honest with you, I used to have a saying when I ran my business, Peter gets paid. I would interview guys and I would have a conversation with them and I'd be like, why are you in this industry? What do you like about it? Well, I just love trucks and, this is my dream job and I've always wanted to do this. I said, so you're going to work for free? No. I'm like, okay, let's all be real. We're here to get paid. And I think a lot of shop owners need to realize that. If you're not in business to make a profit, then you need to go change and be a 501c3 and be a nonprofit. But I'm pretty sure most of you are here to be profitable. And that's what this model does. It shows you a path to 20% net profit. Another thing too is about mindset. I used to tell talking to build on a little bit about stop taking the wins from your employees. It's really annoyed a lot of people in my organization, but they would come to me with a problem. And I would look at them, and it was probably too harsh, but some of them I would say, look, I hired you to solve problems, not make problems. I need you to bring me a solution. As a matter of fact, that was my shop slogan, is we bring solutions. And I always had a rule. I don't care how dumb it is, bring me some kind of solution. And I'll be honest, some of the most ingenious things I never would have thought of myself came from my employees because they weren't afraid to bring me an idea. And I always told them, I said, look, it doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's kind of like if you go talk to Full Bay and say, we want you to do this. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. At least they listen. But you really got to think about that, is that. And I would tell people, look, our customers bring us problems. We're here to solve the problem. So that was one of our visionary, talk about vision, core values, is that everybody understood that they were there to solve the customer's problem. And that meant if that customer's problem today was he hasn't ate all day because he's been broke down in his truck, it's your job to go get him lunch. I understand that's not your job, But we treat customers first and the truck second. I mean, I've never seen a truck driver happier than the day you buy him lunch and he's been broke down all day. It's a very happy guy. So we've got a survey on Slido. What's one task in your shop that you like to put off? So what's the one thing that you just don't like to do? So it looks like they're coming in. So it looks like invoicing customers. So there's this interesting guy named Dan Sullivan. Some of you may have read his books. A really interesting guy. Is a really good way of taking complex things and making them simple. And he said one of the greatest things I remember ever hearing. If you procrastinate on a task, that's okay. That's your brain's way of telling you that's not what you should be doing. So if paying bills is the thing you don't like to do or returning emails, that's good. Don't do it. Get someone else to do it. And I know a lot of you have staffing problems. You say, well, how do I do that? There's ways. You can hire digital assistants. You can hire people that are fairly inexpensive that you have work 20 hours a week, 10 hours a week, and they maybe do a repetitive remedial task. Like I have one that does my company's social media. They edit clips. They do social media posts, things like that. Stuff I don't want to do. But just think about that. If you have a task that you procrastinate, that's your brain's way of telling you you shouldn't be doing that. And it's okay. It's okay not to like to do things. And along with that is business owners have to learn that time is more valuable than money. And I know that if you think this way, you probably realize this with your customers. How many big fleets out there, the very first thing they care about is how much? It's usually how fast can you get it done. So you really need to stop worrying about being who you're not and think about who you really want to be. And this chart's a good example of that. So many of you will spend your day doing things that do not matter. And one thing I tell people is, this is the way I look at an emergency. If someone comes into my office and wants me to drop everything I'm doing to take on a task, I ask myself, a year from now when I look back, will that task be an emergency? If it's not an emergency a year from now, it's not an emergency now. Very few things that you have come up in your life that are urgent are important. And very few important things are urgent. And if you spend more of your time focused on things that are not urgent but are important, big picture ideas like building canned jobs into your software to increase efficiency, that's what really matters. And I know that a lot of people, let me expand on that. A lot of people talk about efficiency and they worry about it. And that's a great thing to worry about. But how many of you have ever sat down and thought, I'm the problem? The way we do it is the problem. The way we quote jobs is the problem. Everybody wants to blame the technician, say, well, it's just because he's slow. Really? How long did it take him to go find a jack because nobody ever puts it back right? You can quote a job all day long, but if you give a guy 5 hours to do a clutch, I don't care if you give the best guy in the world. I've never seen a guy can do a clutch in 5 hours. Maybe they exist, but I want to hire him because he's superhuman, right? So if you set your guys up for failure, they're not going to win. So what you really need to do is sit back and spend your time thinking. Thinking is the hardest thing humans do. And I know a lot of people think that they sit down and think, but how often do you really sit down uninterrupted, give yourself 30 minutes, call it executive time. It's one of the things I advise people to do. Give yourself an hour a day. You got 8 hours of work or 10. Spend 10% of your time thinking, uninterrupted. And think about how do you solve your big problems. Time management is one of the most important skills that you're going to learn as a business owner. How many here, let's do a little exercise real quick, if you got a second. How many here think that if you left for a month, your business would run without you and be as profitable today as it is a month from now? Okay, so all of you that didn't put your hand up, I want you to take your calculator out and put in how much money did your shop make last year? Put in your revenue. Whatever that number is. Now take that number and divide it by 2,080. It's the number of work hours in a year. That's how much you're worth. That's how much your time is worth. Because if your shop cannot run without you, that is what your value is. Because without you, your shop doesn't make money. Now, looking at that number on your calculator, does that change your perspective on what you should be doing with your time? At all? And the other thing is, too, when I coach people, is I say, look, our goal is to get that number down to almost zero. Your value in that business should not be what you produce, and it should not be what you tangibly do each day. It should be the greater overall impact on your business. It should be the way that you steer the ship. Another thing I want to talk about is mentality. So many people thrive off of chaos. And I'm sure everybody can appreciate this in personal lives. You got that friend, that person you know that's always, oh, I'm so busy. You know, I say this, I pick on my brother. I say, you're the busiest guy I know that never gets anything done. Because he feeds off chaos. He loves that dopamine drip. That's why that book, Leading to Doing, is a great book, because it talks about this. That constant dopamine drip that you get from solving all the problems, from being in the fire, from fighting that fire for your people, is feeding you dopamine, just like people that are addicted to video games and social media. You are addicted to the chaos of your shop. The problem with that is that you inadvertently don't realize that the environment that you've created in your shop, the fact that you're a perpetual firefighter, is the type of people that you're attracting. And let me explore this and go way extreme on this. If you have a dirty, poor lit, disorganized shop, you will attract people who are disorganized and are unproductive and do not appreciate systems, and they do not appreciate clean. And probably everybody here can appreciate what I'm saying. You've probably known a mechanic that was like that. He was Pigpen. We actually had a guy one time. Cool story. His name was Tyson. We went to McDonald's one day for lunch. He says, I don't want to go Subway. I'm going to walk over to McDonald's. I said, cool. This guy was so dirty that he was sitting on the curb eating his cheeseburger because a bus had just pulled up full of people and there was no room. Somebody walked by and handed him a dollar bill because he thought he was homeless. We had to work on Tyson's appearance after that. Great guy, though. So you really do. You have to change your brain. You have to change the energy source in your brain. You have to change that you don't feed off the chaos. You need to feed off your employees and your team's wins. So if you feel like you're a constant firefighter, if you're perpetually, all you get done is put out fires, you really need to ask yourself, how much time are you spending preventing fires? And this goes back to that time management thing, right? So unless putting out fires is your business model, you really need to review that. And it goes back to that, what I call the daddy fix-it model, right? If you're the type of person who gets that joy from fixing all the problems, from being that guy who has all the answers, it may be a limiting factor in your business. So you get addicted to that. You get addicted to that dopamine drip. So what does that look like? What does it manifest as if you're trying to evaluate your shop? What are some situations that are like that? Not putting out physical fires. I've had to deal with that too. That is an emergency. But if you're reacting to a problem instead of anticipating it, so if you can't stand up in front of your employees on Monday morning and say, yeah, I knew this is how this is going to work out, meeting last week, you're not anticipating. I used to have some of my store managers, they would joke that I was psychic. I said, I'm not psychic, guy. I can just see what's coming. I can see that it's Friday afternoon. You just put on a used tag axle and, oh, surprise, that quick release valve doesn't work. How did I know that? I've been doing this for 20 years. plus. How do I also know that? Something always goes wrong on Friday afternoon, right? Perfect example of cross-training. If your parts guy went home and nobody knows how to look up parts, what are you going to get done today? Nothing. Because you haven't planned for that eventuality, right? It's kind of like I used to have people, they would be like, oh my God, we're so busy. I'm like, it's 10 below zero, of course we're busy. I'm like, did you not think that's what was going to happen today? Like, this is what we are here for. This is what we trained for. It's what we prepared for. Today is our Super Bowl, if you will. I used to say that. When it was 20 below zero in Iowa, today's Super Bowl. You're going to earn your money. So what are some of the things you can do? You learn from patterns. You start looking at your business. This is what you do with your executive time. Look at your sales. Look at your customer patterns. Look at your employee patterns. Really pay attention to employee patterns. People are very cyclical. They go through cycles, whether you recognize them or not. Humans are very cyclical, and they love their cycles. So watch those things. Also understand what's called a feedback loop. What's a feedback loop? It's when you get stuck in this never-ending cycle of problems that you can't seem to break out of. And how do you break out of that? One of the ways you do that is shifting from being reactive to proactive. So trying to see those things happen before they do. You kind of need to look at your shop like an ecosystem. Look at it like if you were a farmer trying to tend to a crop, right? You're going to get out of it what you put into it. One of the main factors is efficiency. So this is a big illustration of how much of an impact it makes, just changing your efficiency. So this example, I've got a shop with 10 techs. They work 40 hours a week. They're 50% efficient. If you use the average shop labor rate, $135 an hour, they're making $27,000 a week in labor revenue. Now you really should double this because most shops, for every $100 in labor, they're selling about $100 in part. It's a pretty standardized ratio. But just imagine how much more money you make by just increasing your efficiency. And like I said, you can double that number. So it's garbage in, garbage out. If you've got bad data too, you really have to watch that. A lot of shop owners think they have good data, but they don't understand that the information going in is flawed. And it is possible to run 120% efficient. I've had technicians do it. Now, given they were doing some more repetitive things, dealing with fleets, but some of you that deal with fleets that do more repetitive things, there's absolutely no reason why you can't get over 100%. And some of the things to look at is things like cleaning a bay. I can't believe how many shop owners say that the technician is cleaning a bay on like lost time. I'm like, why are you doing that? You know, another thing to look at is your technicians too, are they on red all the time? Which is another really big thing that's an area of contention for me. One other thing to watch about when you're trying to increase the efficiency in the shop, I know a lot of you may use things called shop tickets to try to monitor or incentivize a technician to do shop tasks. You really need to watch those like a hawk. If you do any type of efficiency bonus in your shop, you need to watch those because they're kind of like a blank check and they get abused. And I'm not saying that people do it intentionally, it just tends to happen. It starts piling up. Now it's, I need a shop ticket to go wash the shop truck. I'm like, dude, I needed to wash my service truck. I'm like, you're the service technician. Keeping it clean is part of your job. We've defined this earlier on in the agreement that it's your responsibility to keep the truck clean. So when you're sitting there for 15 minutes waiting on payment, right, waiting for that comm check to come in on your service call, you better be cleaning your tools up. I'm not going to pay you to clean that truck up on my time. You do that on the job. If anybody wants to reach me, there's my contact information. I'm always willing to help. It's not just, for me, it's not just about what I do as a business. And that's it. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
You got to that point where you were on that one, you got your few technicians, you do it rate free, you can't be a technician, you need to run your business. Is there a moment where something that could slap you in the face about this?
Yeah, it was 5 o'clock in the morning. One morning I was sitting in my office writing out checks and I said, there's no way I can be broke. My parking lot is full. I'm 2 weeks out. How am I broke? Where did all the money go? And what happened was I never truly learned, because I'm a traditionally trained mechanic. I went to school to be a mechanic. I got my AA degree. I didn't take business class, right? That's not what I went to school for. And I realized that I was financially dumb. I was just illiterate. And it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. I realized that that's really what running a business is. It's all about numbers. And then I had to learn how to manage my numbers. That was when it happened. But part of it comes down to, too, you got to figure out what you want to be when you grow up. That's why I ask people that. Maybe you don't want to sit in an office and crunch numbers all day. Maybe all you want to do, like I did. I went out and started a technical college because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to teach. So we did that pre-COVID. We had our own college at our shop, and we did that. And that was my thing. I enjoyed it. And it wasn't always about, maybe it's, you have a different dream.
You were talking about KPIs.
Yes.
Where can we find out more information about that, or if you wouldn't mind going back to that a little bit?
So this is basically just a business model. And KPIs, so I believe that every position in a building, when talking about what good is and what bad is, everybody needs to have 3 to 5 numbers. Closer to 3 if they're an entry-level guy, maybe 5 numbers for a store manager, right? That this is how we judge your performance. And I literally could walk up to any employee at any one of my shops, and I could have them look at their tech home screen, because we use Fullway, of course, and they could tell me, I'm doing great. I'm going to bonus this week. Awesome. I love writing big checks. Nothing makes me happier than writing a big bonus check every week. And by the way, if you're doing bonuses, I highly advise doing it weekly because people are short-term mind. A month from now, they forgot what they did right a month ago to get a bonus.
What's your bonus?
Well, I have a whole thing on that Thursday, or you can come over and I can show it to you briefly. It's pretty complex, meaning it's all-inclusive, but it's incredibly simple. It's a pretty interesting system. But KPIs, this is shop KPIs, like for maybe owner-level KPIs. We're looking at budgeting. A technician's KPI, one every technician had, 32 hours. What's 32 hours? Minimum condition for employment. If you work for me, you got to produce 80%. I didn't think that was asking too much. If you want me to pay you for 40 hours, I just need you to give me at least 32 of production. I thought that was fair. But we had that agreement going into it. When they were hired, they knew that. They knew what was expected of them. And they became part of the solution. I could go to a technician and say, hey, you're off this week. What's going on? They're like, dude, the service advisor is messing me up. They're quoting this job wrong. I'm like, awesome. Bring it to me. Let's fix this. I think we're good. Thank you for everyone.